shot back there, he's not crying.
I'm sure that hit a little hard Saturday. You gotta get past Illinois, so.
I got a picture of the coach, though.
Oh my.
Oh, look, I was at the Michigan game. Right. For buyout.
I guess that's the only flag we got over here.
Yeah, one right back there in the corner.
There's one right next to you.
Yeah, there's a little one right there and a little one back in the corner.
Can't even believe that. Couldn't bring the flag over here.
Put it in the budget. Get a new flag.
Just go there and hold it.
Here's a flag.
There you go. We got one.
Oh, yeah, the little one.
Well, 7:30, 7:31.
Okay.
Mr. Darling will be late. Call the meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. Let's do roll call here. Leroy Ziske. Present. Mr. Nichols.
Here.
Mr. Turner. Here. Mr. Howard. Here. Amy Hirsch.
Here.
Vice Chairman Darling.
Here.
And myself, I'm present. All right, we had the agenda. It's pretty simple tonight. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
All right, motion by Leroy,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Howard. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, the minutes, did not have the minutes until tonight when we got here. Has everybody had a chance to look through them? They're in your packet. That's right.
Oh.
We moved it over there.
My packet went with the other ones?
You had one. I put it back on the file.
I'd have got up, young man, and got those for you.
But he got up and carried them over there already. Done it once.
I know. He said he didn't need one.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written for August,
For October.
or October, I'm sorry. I was like,
How long's your foot been messed up?
no, sorry about
It's
that.
not gonna play medicine. Said your pain man's
The
talking, huh?
paper's off.
All right, motion by Kenneth Howard. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, first citizens time. Yeah,
I'm Sean Westergaard. Last month on the agenda, you were supposed to address the apparent discrepancy between the general ordinance and the extraction ordinance. And you used basically, there isn't a conflict. Ed's got an extraction. It should go under the extraction ordinance. And using the general ordinance to strip away the protections that the specific ordinance allows residents, I think is a ridiculous move, on your part, and I don't think it would pass planning 101. The specific extraction ordinance would take precedence, and you can't remove the protections of the specific ordinance for residents and run a driveway 10 feet along the property line when there's supposed to be a 100-foot buffer. Second thing is, it would appear that last month you guys approved Ed's plan that's got dewatering. It's got cement tile for dewatering in the legend, and it's got a reservoir pond up by Oakey Road with cement tiling in it that looks like it appears into the drainage ditch. And you've been telling us for over a year that he does not have permission to dewater. So I wondered if you even looked at those plans. The other thing is, I think residents should know that the township is signing off on Ed's ponds and giving him back his bond before the ponds are finished and not telling the owners about it. That's a great way to run the township. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, hearing none, let's go on to unfinished business. Solar ordinance project discussions ongoing. That's a good way to title it.
Just to point out, the ordinance that you've got in your package here is not the most current one. The most current one goes back to what was done in the changes in the July 6, 2022. This one's only current as of May 16th, so this is not the current
You know,
ordinance.
I was looking at that too. There was one more from July.
July 6th. Because it's in 3 different colors for what the changes were, because at the July 6th, we deleted that, letter Y. I think that was the part that you brought up, Carol, that we deleted the Y, which made a lot of sense. You want, everybody's got the copy of the,
No, we got the
July
copy of
6th.
the one that's there.
yeah, the one that was in here is not complete.
Is there any way that we could get a copy of that, since the one we got was wrong, and the engineer looks like he doesn't have the current copy
Somebody's
either?
gonna need to make a copy of what I have. And then you might wanna do it with the color, because you have
This
the
is the one I got.
Mike, do you want some help sorting them and stuff? Okay.
But that's the 512. Right. Mine. You added Y, is that what you said, Doug?
No, we deleted what was Y.
Well, I got, oh, W is M and Y is N.
Yeah, there's,
You delete, so I got, there's one pass up?
yeah, because we rearranged some of it,
It was emailed to everybody at one point.
yeah. Yeah, we deleted the Y, and we had added.
Right, because we worked off of the stuff from Summerfield got added.
You get the top of the
And then
cover,
it taken out.
and that's my copy. Yeah, I have made it all.
So I have to pay the big bucks around here.
Right.
Yeah, July.
Right here. Well, it, yeah, it got it on July 11th.
Yep.
She's testing you.
I figured you were young enough.
You're saving it for somebody you didn't like, that's for sure.
Is somebody going to make copies of that?
Yeah, Mike is back there.
Okay. Yes, I should have. 'Cause I got busy.
Doug's favorite color.
She was should say that.
That's it. That's it.
Cool.
You want me to hold that over here?
No, that's just part of it. It would,
Is that better?
it ain't gonna get no better. I have not had residents, so. I thought about it, but the idea of somebody coming at my, eyeballs is something that's essentially a weapon. But they used it. Didn't hurt for about 3 hours, took a nap, woke up, it was fine. As soon as it was over, she could see.
That's ordinance is published for changes report.
That's nice, isn't it?
Well, I was for a long time.
There's like county field 6 times and that might make it. This is what we do it.
Everybody. That's it. I don't know. Oh, with the crops this year.
And I was spending 7 to 8 grand a week for 6 weeks. And we dump everything on that, the credit card for fuel, and it's automatically paid again. I got 30,000 limit on it. Bang that down.
That's what they have in front of
That's pretty good. isn't it?
Thank you, Brandon. Brandon.
Nice, well,
Wetlands just run across.
It's energy,
it. It
which
says
ran the ship.
wetland and
Plus, this doesn't count because FEMA over the low ice.
so what are we doing there?
This is wetlands.
yeah, but isn't it going,
This is where the proper lines go through.
yeah. Cause they were talking, I thought. Here's Townsend. This goes, continues to
What they want
Townsend,
is,
but here, back in here,
There?
Yeah, but
Then
it would be bunts, because there's bunts, so it would be this whole area.
came through a different map.
They're not even gonna get
The township had approved the FEMA map, which is the federal government.
that one.
So this map was updated exactly.
Yeah, it's just.
But it's a future, it's all the states from the future. This looks like where the. So you get the planning commission and you get the like you got swamps. This is a swamp.
That's what it comes down to.
We call it one of the swamps.
you're right, it's kind of discouraging when you think about it. So like, why?
No, thank you.
So we're gonna look at that. And you're looking at this, see, I used to get straight from the middle.
This one is correct.
That's all there was in green, was just that last one, right, Doug?
Yeah, well, there was one other line that was added to it farther in there that was, put in on that July 6th. It was about the holidays. It was about the holiday defining that.
This was all Indiana.
Through the foot.
All them trees there are wild, Look forward to.
Especially with the newest cleaned up.
Oh, the holidays is defined by township, holiday came in Thursday on 19.
I couldn't even bring my backpack, I tried, I felt like I
Yeah.
had to flip over, so I was like, hey, but showed up.
Could have probably just had one here since this
She's
picture.
a little careful.
Probably, but that way everybody's
She's getting off
current.
the couch, she's
Comes in.
like,
Yeah,
just
because
like
some people don't read their emails.
roll, you know, roll gracefully, and roll.
Oh, man.
You've fallen so higher spots in that, but it's just the way she talked.
I was like, no, I don't, dude, I only did it like probably 25 miles an hour, I was like trying to go fast, or something, kind of wheelie a little bit, but once you came down,
The, commercial pesticides
write it, and I was like a clown on it, because it's so little, you know? I shouldn't have been on it, but. Yeah, exactly.
That's what it was there for.
See, we've got all these really cool cameras all around.
That isn't growing, everybody's starting.
My husband's friend was riding his little, just one of those little fat tire, little short bike things. And, oh my gosh, he went to take off and it shot out from under him and they both just flipped right. I got that on camera. That was so funny. We laughed so hard.
This one was a good one too, probably, but nobody got it.
Well, is there anything else anybody wants to discuss while we're waiting on Prince to come back? So we're not just sitting here visiting amongst ourselves?
Well, I know there were three things that we, had spoke about, when we requested Mr. Kibisky.
Are we going in like, new business,
The same thing.
old business to new business? I just thought we get old business, we probably better have the right copy to work off from, and then we'll go to new business.
Same
Yep.
thing, really.
Right. It's just
Nice.
because there were, huh?
It'd be nice to be able to refer things to him as we speak about it, though.
Right. Well, just give us an opportunity if there's something to share before we get it opened up, I think. But you give us a chance to get this done.
Copy. My mom did that, I got a brand new birthday for Christmas, and she wanted to ride it, and she took off the little wheelie and left, and both wheels. Oh, that's my bike all, I was so pissed. My Christmas present.
He said it messed the bike up.
Oh, you did? You didn't mess it up?
So how did you get hurt?
On my son's old dirt bike.
Oh. The seat wasn't high enough? Get your foot down?
That is a lot of it, yeah. It's like, you know how like, normally you hold on with your knees, but it's so little, it's like kind of below my knees even kind of, so it's, you know.
So
I
have
was
a
standing
question.
up because I tried to get him to stand up because it's motocross, so you want to stand up as much as you can, so.
Right.
I know if I'd have sat down just for a second, he'd be like, why are you sitting down? You know what I mean? He's smart like that, so I was standing up
Okay.
on that little bitty bike, and then when I hit the gas, it came up on a wheelie, and I hit the back brake, and then it like threw me kind of forward, my foot slipped off.
Threw you kinda forward,
It threw me really fast forward.
so you went over the handlebars, is that what you're saying?
Not completely, but I wish that I would have, because I probably would have broke my leg. I should have just let it go and just went over it like
But-
that.
So at the moment, it's a little tough to pick up garbage, haul
Yeah.
water, or pour concrete,
It's
isn't
a little
it?
hard to do. I'm still doing a little bit, but yeah,
This guy's a little pal, you could
Good
ride.
thing you got good help, huh?
yeah, that's what we're talking about. You think I got good health though, and all of them, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do a little bit though, like I was picking up dumpsters earlier today.
Yeah, I was gonna call and check in with you guys.
At least you can
What was that?
drive.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can drive.
What's his right foot, isn't it?
Left.
Left.
Oh, yeah.
Automatic anyways.
Yeah.
You know, push the push.
yeah, just to take off. I could probably do it. Yeah.
Power shift, there you go.
Well. Yeah, probably does. Used to
Like
be,
a copy, we should just put those stack in them.
I don't know what we got back there. Well, that would be good. Me and the help.
Yeah, I've been.
She went out that
doing a
road.
Study.
Oh, she went out the other door.
I did. I had a in our water department.
See Penny back there. I was helping.
For their first order. And then they put it in their civil shirts, which were about 43. Then I got a friend from North that owns landscape business. And
Yeah.
We might start talking about it a little bit with what we have, right?
Well, that's right, that's what I asked, if there's anything we want to discuss, but everybody's waiting for the right copy. There you come.
Oh, yeah. We can start with
I
it.
visited with Mike.
We got more coming.
Thanks, Mike.
She's raised, my youngest daughter's raised. We always make sure they have a vehicle for, local high school national.
We're gonna have,
I think,
we're gonna
you
have
guys have
another
the
one.
right copy?
Yes.
You got a copy?
Or they got the right copy?
I think we're on there.
Is there another one?
They got my original.
So we
You
know
want it? You want the right copy?
Yeah, I would love it, please.
As long as everybody's got one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I got one there, but it's a little hard to write on. So. Well, that's, yeah.
Luckily, there's.
You really are, you talking about it.
So. All right, now that we're looking at the right copy, is there anything anybody wants to visit before we include Mr. Kibitsky in the conversation?
Well, there was one thing, the J, it's probably something I don't understand, it's something like that.
Okay,
There's a 5 on the fourth line, fourth line down, about the middle, it says 5 kilometers, what does that mean? Under J.
Under J.
The fourth line down, in the middle, there's a 5.
oh, the 5, the perimeter of a large solar, yeah,
What's the 5 mean?
that's just a,
Probably a typo.
that's a typo, Leroy.
So I
That's a good catch.
I got a question about the screening and security of this. So what is like the requirement for these guys if they have dead trees, and it's not screened properly? Like, I understand they can go plant another one, but I mean, if this is into, let's say, 10 years down the road, and they're planting 4-foot trees to begin with, now they're 10-foot, are they gonna put a 4-foot one back in there? 7, 8 of them that died, or, I mean, that were never, on the life of the whole solar project, ever get a proper screening. Because, I mean, I listened to their little program they had at the Milan High School, the question and answer deal, and they said, well, we just plant another tree, but they're not even planning on watering these trees. They're not, you know, there's nothing, and anybody knows you plant any type of tree in these water. This rain is not, we don't get enough rain to grow any type of tree whatsoever.
Oh, certainly didn't this year.
All my pine trees die if I don't water them when you plant them for the first couple of years. So I don't understand how this, and what is the, I mean, who's gonna, like, when they die, are they gonna be planted right away? I mean, there's nothing in here that states any of that.
Well, I thought under number 2, it says all unhealthy, and dead material should be replaced by applicant within a year, or the next appropriate planning period, so, you know.
I mean, I'm
obviously-
just, like, I was down in Indiana and I ran across a solar farm, and I got a picture right here, and this is kind of what I envision it. They got like the fence, and then there's like 4 trees that are alive in front of the whole solar farm, and this farm's 10 years old. So, and I mean, it is an ongoing issue, because everybody talks about it, and everybody, I could just think that should be a little more regulated. into that problem,
Can you put an irrigation method to it?
then how do they get the water? I mean, they're gonna have to do a well, or take some well, or, I don't know, I'm just, you know.
You know, if you had good water, sulfur in it.
Are we veterans, is that what they,
Arborvitae?
isn't that what they're planning on putting in front of it? What they
I
talked
guess
about?
I think they talked
That's what
about
you plant
somewhat
inside your house.
native trees.
No,
Half of them.
Yeah.
We watered a lot.
I don't know, I could just see it being a problem, I mean, they keep hyping this screening up like, oh, it won't be visible after the screening's, you know, grown up. Well, you're starting out with 4-foot plants and they don't, you know, nothing grows that spectacular, especially with no water. So I can see it never be, you know,
Well, if you look at number 5, it says failure to install or continuously maintain the required vegetative buffer shall constitute a violation of this ordinance, and any special use may be subject to revocation.
right, but I mean, like, a year would be violation. A year's a long time.
It is.
To not, I mean, you think about it, they plant these 4-foot plants, and let's say 80% of them die because they don't get water. They have a year to replant those. Now you're starting back with 4-foot plants again. Now they
they-
die again, you got another year. You're never gonna get there.
They have, whatever it says, a year or the next planting season, whichever comes first.
Planting,
Planting period.
spring, fall.
Yeah, there's only certain times you're gonna plant trees.
Trees probably better than fall.
Yeah. So it'd be, yeah.
So, I mean, it is kind of spelled out, but you're right, it's,
But it also says all unhealthy, 60% dead or greater. So even if you've got 1 or 2 that dies, they don't have to replant those or anything.
I just know if something does like this happen, we're not gonna pull their permit from them because of some dead trees. It's just not gonna happen. So why wouldn't we, I don't know, if you can incorporate a fine for it, incorporate something that's a little more extreme. I mean, this is all people have between their residence and a massive solar field. I would think if that came behind my house or in front of my house, I'd plant the trees myself to eliminate it.
To help correct that, I would suggest that we eliminate the 60% dead or greater, and you simply have the line read, all unhealthy and dead material shall be replaced by the applicant within 1 year or by the approximate proper appropriate planting period, whichever occurs first.
so
And
just
and then-
cross out the 60.
Yeah, just cross out that 60, so if it's dead, then we'll replace it.
I think that's 60%
But I
refers to
think-
the tree.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
that's
what
what I
I
thought.
kinda thought, but it's not very clear that way, so, like, Jimmy's construed thinking that, okay, you planted 100 trees, you don't do anything until 60 of them are dead, and that's not really what the intent is. No, I don't think that's the interpretation, but
Well, I
by the way
also-
this is read, so, or the way this is written, so by just simply crossing out the 60% dead or greater, it just simply says unhealthy, because you can determine whether or not you got pine shoot beetle or whatever it is that's affecting your conifers that you've got there for the screening, and that they would take the appropriate actions.
Unhealthy and dead
I
material.
think we should
be
also
replaced.
incorporate in there, they should be the height of the existing trees. Not, you got 10-foot trees, and then all of a sudden they plant a bunch of 3-foot trees in there to replace that, and you're never achieving that height to cover that. I mean, you could buy them at any height, it just costs more money. And I don't really care how much they gotta spend, that's their problem. I would think everybody, if it does create something around somebody's house, they at least deserve to have a buffer where it's not being seen
For,
to an extent.
to move things along, I would move under J that we delete the portion that says 60% dead or greater, and simply eliminate those within the,
those words, so
Yeah.
it will read then, all unhealthy and dead material shall be replaced by applicant within 1 year. Or next appropriate planting period, whichever comes
Yep.
first. Well, you could add in there to be replaced
By equivalent
With,
size trees.
Same height trees
with
currently.
equal maturity or something.
Something.
I don't know
Equal
how we
height,
say that.
equal height, you wouldn't say maturity, equal height, that's what you're looking for. So
Okay,
after, or whichever occurs first, with a tree of equal height of the existing trees.
screening of equal height or equal density or
Equal height,
And type.
yeah,
Well, you could do that too.
yeah.
That'd be the place to put it, whichever comes first.
So, another thing is too,
Replaced with like trees with like
with equal height.
of equal height to what's there. Like vegetation with like vegetation
Of equal height.
of equal height.
Of existing
Yeah, of equal
vegetation.
equal height of existing, that's the way to put it.
So,
Of existing.
vegetation, yeah. So then we also have native trees shall be placed no more than 30 feet apart. So you're telling me you can plant a pine tree, that's what they call choose, 30 feet apart on center, and shrubs shall be spaced no more than 7 feet apart. So you plant those arbor, whatever they are, that go straight out, 7 feet apart, those don't even go 7 feet wide.
See, some of them like.
There's different
Ju-
types of varieties.
junipers.
A pine tree, you know how long it takes to get 30 feet wide?
Oh,
Dude, that's a 50-year-old tree. It will never be a buffer. It will never, if you plant a privacy fence, you want them every 15 feet at least minimum.
After second round, like, we put it back in.
I just think that's not much of a screening at all.
okay.
So are we looking to do, 15
Change
apart?
30 to something different?
10.
You've gotta,
That's what my
you gotta
mind-
take in consideration for the different types of varieties of trees, and they have minimum width planting distance, so it
Well,
goes
can we
back to
put,
the
can we put,
Something that's only gonna be
Because
15 or
that's
20
within-
years old.
within-
Get 15.
within 10 years, I mean, whatever they choose,
Yeah.
within 10 years, can they be no more than a foot apart?
yeah, that's
Of
where,
some sort, you know,
cause
something with that.
you have different types of trees, different types of conifers, that they have different widths, different girths, different heights, different growing rates. That's why pine's classified as a softwood. So then you've got those things that come into play, and then also there's certain types of trees that don't tolerate other types of trees. Like if you ever have walnut trees, you're not gonna grow
Well, that's
anything
why,
else on them.
they're the professionals, they
Yeah.
do this
They're
stuff.
not gonna plant walnuts anyway, but, cause they're slow growing.
What tree would grow 30 feet wide in 30 years
It's not gotta
Well,
go 30
it's
feet,
only gotta grow
gotta go
15.
each way?
Yeah.
30 feet total. Yeah,
But
30 feet one way, 30 feet the other.
15
Well, it don't grow one way, it grows both
15
ways,
each way.
30 feet wide.
Each way you go.
What tree grows 30 feet in 30 years, other than an oak or even that?
Well, it's,
Nothing.
you're not necessarily gonna use oaks, you're gonna want something that's closer to
No,
the
I
ground.
understand
that's
that,
gonna
I'm
fill
saying
that
not
in.
even,
I
not
mean,
even,
like our pine trees filled in
Yeah.
nice.
I planted my pine trees 15 feet apart, it's
Because
been
you could also
17
put in,
years and
you
they're
could
just
put in
now
blue
touching each other.
spruce, you could put in Douglas firs, you could put, there's just a host of different
They
ones.
were,
We're gonna get muddled down in horticultural and being an arborist here, and we don't all have that type of expertise.
Well, that's
So-
why we should make it,
Yeah.
it's to an expertise,
Yeah.
because
Well, they should-
if we require that, that's what they're
Yeah.
gonna do.
Yeah, they're gonna make
If
the
we don't have
tree
the
required.
expertise, then we need to talk to somebody and figure that out.
Evergreen shall be placed no greater than 15 feet apart, it says that right up above. So that the tree only's gotta grow 7.5 feet diameter.
Oh, then it says native trees should be placed no more than 30
Yeah.
feet, so native tree
Yeah.
would be like
A spruce or
maple or something.
or maples or whatever, so then,
Cotton.
you know, we've actually got this pretty well
Says
covered.
the evergreens
Max, make it
shall
like
be
3 feet inside the
spaced
evergreen.
more than 15 feet apart.
So it says evergreen trees to be spaced no more than 15 apart right above that.
Yeah, so we're getting,
I kinda got off in the
for,
weeds.
for the,
sorry.
for the state, I guess I would move that we strike the 60% dead or greater and add the words with like vegetation of equal height
Of existing.
of existing plantings.
I think that's good. Does anybody have a problem with that?
I'll support it.
All right, supported. An official motion, or are we just
Yes,
working on
do
this? Okay. Doug made a motion to strike that verbiage we talked about, the 60%, and add the verbiage, it has to be, like vegetation of equal height of what's existing. And it's seconded by Leroy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
Opposed? That motion's carried. Okay. Is there anything else we wanna talk about before we go on to new business and get our honored guest involved?
Can we move to new business and come back to this so that we can get?
Absolutely.
We're gonna
just-
be, it's all the same.
It is all the
It
same.
is all the
It is
same,
all
but
the
let's-
same.
Because at least then we can kinda ask them some questions, like, that's how to refer back to where we're at.
All right,
So maybe it might speed the process up a little bit, I guess.
let's move on to new business then.
now, the
So-
first page is very defined, requirement on, at the bottom of page 1. Do we have an industrial research document or definition in our zoning ordinance?
For industrial, yeah, we do have it back in the definitions in the
We're
book.
gonna have to move you to the middle, Leroy, so we can hear you better.
It's back there.
Apologize. Can you say that again?
At the bottom of page 1, we
Okay,
have prime ag,
right.
agriculture reserve, and industrial research. Do we
Right.
have a definition for industrial research in our zoning ordinance?
We do, it's back in, oh gosh, what is it? It's back like on page 5-20-something, 29, and then you've got it up like on page 2-6 regarding light industrial section, that you've got it on page 2-5 that defines what the industrial research district is, and then you go back to,
Right here, 2-5.
Does the township have any industrial?
no,
Industrial Research District right here, 2-110.
We don't have any zone.
We don't have any industrial.
So if you leave that in there, then I think they can request a spot zone anywhere, if I'm not mistaken. Because we haven't defined an area, correct?
Yeah, they requested.
List of all.
Are we moving into my phase?
Yes.
All right, I got a couple questions. Let's beat that tree thing to death here for a second. Who's gonna define unhealthy? Right, so that answer is you should get an arborist, and you should put that in there, an arborist makes that decision, not you guys. Second thing is, I highly suggest do not use arborvitaes, because that's being actually outlawed in quite a few communities now, for several reasons. One is the way they grow straight up, they don't really do anything, they just look pretty. Most of them just look pretty. Second thing, they've actually caused the deer population to grow tremendously because deer love arborvitae. So if you're gonna be using that as a deterrent to see something, you're gonna be having a lot of deer next to the road, which we all really enjoy when we're driving at night. So let's minimize that too, guys, okay?
You don't have to
That's
drag
a
them
good
so
point.
far.
Buicks and Fords kill about 52,000 deer every fall.
What does?
Buicks and Fords
Oh, Buicks and Fords only?
kill about 52,000, and that comes into your auto insurance premiums cost.
Arborist.
Yeah, I got a 6-point last year, 1 week before
Yeah.
season started,
With a Ford or a?
with my Ford F-150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a very good point.
And because globe arborvitaes can get a little bit larger, but they don't get the height.
Junipers or something, is what I've been looking at, using up north. Okay,
Actually, you want, well, use, they don't get as big, but use will kill a horse.
We briefly talked about number 5, Mr. Chair, you're right, you can't just say, okay, you didn't do it, so we're going to pull your permit. Well, it's already there,
right.
so pulling, what are you achieving by pulling their permit? You're gonna cut their wires? You know, so it's not doing anything, the only thing that you can really, and a lot of this things, the only way you can incentivize anybody to do anything would be financially. So you have to put that in consideration. If you don't do this, we will do it for you, and you're gonna have X amount of dollars in the bank that we're gonna use to make it happen,
Okay,
okay? So that's the direction you should be considering. You're not going to pull the permit, you can have it reviewed periodically, like we do with the mining operation. But again, once that's in and installed, it's done. There's really no moving parts.
do you think about, creating a fine or more of creating a statute that says we're just gonna have it taken care of the way we expect it done and then send them the bill they're responsible for it?
Something of that nature, yeah, and
Which way would be better?
I think you should have irrevocable letter of credit.
Credit, yeah.
That's the only way to go, surety bonds and that kind of thing. If it's an LLC, they can go out of business tomorrow and you've lost everything. So,
Letter of credit, you got the lender is on the hook for it because they had to go sign the letter of
the
credit.
lender is on the hook, not the individual that's putting the thing together, number 1. Number 2, you'd have the right to go to that, but you're gonna tell the person that you're gonna use your money. Oh, by the way, you're not doing this based on the approval from the planning commission. So we're gonna take care of it for you, you got 30 days, if you don't do it, we're doing it. And then your township attorney writes them a letter saying that's what we're gonna do, and if they don't do it, then you take care of it, take money out of the bank to make it happen. So, it's not really a fine, it's not a penalty, it's just taking care of something they're not. And some of these companies, as you know, are out of sight, out of mind. In other words, once they build this, do they live there? Do they watch, they don't, they're gone.
It's the same thing
That's-
as a
that's-
decommissioning, really, I mean.
What's
it's-
that?
It's the same thing as a decommission, like if they leave and don't decommission, we have that bond that they.
Yeah, again, it's not gonna be a bond, I'm gonna highly recommend a letter of credit.
Right.
And it's the same thing. If it's decommissioned for that X amount of time that you have in there, that's a good cause to make sure that you have a way of doing it, but, and that's gonna have to be directly involved with the owner of the property as well too, not just the individual that installed it, but that's gonna be kind of a mutual agreement that everybody understands. Because once they leave, once that LLC leaves, once all the federal grants for this stuff disappears, you're not gonna get any more of these. And so you're going to then end up with a solar array that's got a life expectancy, I don't know what they've told you, but they're about 15 years.
Yeah, well, they doubled that.
Okay, well, that's not true. I mean, I'm sure they told you that, but, on the average, they run about 15 years, and then they have to start replacing. 20 years if it's, and you have to have a plan of attack if that's gonna happen. If they're gonna continue to use it, great, make sure you chase those panels. Cause they're all solar panels have a life expectancy, you have to understand that, they're not forever,
Right.
so. And you have to have a vehicle into which, when I say vehicle, I'm talking about a financial vehicle, a legal vehicle to get those replaced, so that's still functioning per se. Because then you say they wanna decommission it, or maybe it's only making 50% now. At what point does the township say, okay, now it's an eyesore because it's really not functioning as it was approved? Have you put thought into that? You could, it may or may not be, give it about 15, 20 years, 80% of the panels may not be working anymore. Is that still a functioning solar field? That's the question.
Well, how would we know that it's not functioning correctly?
Good question, Leroy. They know what their output is.
I understand that.
You can request, okay,
We can audit
we're
that.
approving this, we wanna know what your output is, year one. And then year five, you can ask again, you might have a 15% decrease, maybe 20%. You can request, not request, you can require it within your planning commission approval of a solar array.
Shouldn't we put it in here, as I say?
Yeah, I would just simply put an audit of their annual output of the megawatts that they're producing. And
That'd be
it's an
ideal.
annual report,
Yeah.
because they're gonna get that from Edison or Consumer or whoever. And that would be a very simple, they just make a copy of what they sent.
And they have already made an agreement with Edison or Consumers for the net metering system that they're doing then?
Yeah, they would have to, because where the net metering laws are, I could not figure any of these guys ever getting that gun ho without having some kind of an idea what the return was gonna be.
Yeah.
Because net
Exactly.
metering was like 2 cents on the kilowatt, where you were paying 11 or 12 at that time, because they own the infrastructure. And that net metering was a conversation, about 25 years ago, that was a big thing in the legislature, and they still.
Actually, when I when I got my lead accredited professional thing, they made a big deal out of net metering.
Yeah.
And now that's going downhill very fast. Net metering is almost not even worth doing anymore because of what it's cost. But anyways, that's more consumer than it is wholesale like they're doing.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you as an engineer. What, could you define what a structure is? What would you classify as structure in our ordinance?
I'll define what a structure is, not necessarily what you define a structure as in your ordinance. A structure is anything that you're going to need to be engineered in such a way that you have gusts of wind more than 150 miles an hour, an uplift per se, and they would be a key thing. In other words, that would have to be designed by a professional engineer registered in the state of Michigan to make sure that that panel doesn't show up in the neighbor's yard next week. That would be a structure. And also part of the structure would be making sure that you have a soil analysis to confirm that that foundation will in fact hold that in place one way or the other. So that means soil borings would be taken care of, because there's some places here in the township that's darn near peat moss, and some places it's sand, some places it's clay. That's gonna be critically important.
So, I mean, would you go as far as saying like, solar, what do they call those, table or whatever it is where they put all the solar panels on? That would be classified as a structure?
Absolutely. And other ones that we've already looked at, reviewed, and that where I'm personally aware of, all of them have a PE stamp on, professional engineer stamp on them, to confirm the location, the wind speeds, the soil analysis. They all have to put that into consideration. You can't just throw this in the field and cross your fingers.
And then obviously like the substation, that would obviously be a structure. 'cause it'd be
Correct. That'd be under the
concrete.
Michigan Building Code and go
Right.
into that direction there to make sure it's,
And then, like if they built an owl barn or something for a maintenance barn, that would be classified as a structure.
absolutely
So everything they're putting on this land is basically considered a structure.
correct. And it's a commercial application. This isn't, so you'd be looking under the Michigan Building Code, 2015 Michigan Building Code. It wouldn't be under the residential code. And it wouldn't be under the life safety code, which is a whole different can of worms that comes from the state of Michigan.
So it'd be under the commercial code.
It'd be under the, yes, it's called the 2015 Michigan
Because they
Building
said
Code.
it wasn't a structure. That's what
They may wanna defer that to the utility,
Commission.
commission too as well. But that's still in your township, so you still have the right to say, okay, we want this to be under the Michigan Building Code.
And would that count also for the actual structure of the panels? The,
Yes,
should go underneath the builder's code too. So our
In other words-
inspectors would be coming and verifying that it's,
well, how it usually happens is they'll give you a set of drawings, and on that drawing, they'll show you they're using, I don't know, C-channel aluminum, and I'll give you a dimension on that, and how it bolts together, and how it's bolted to the concrete on the ground, and Or they might just put posts all the way down and have the friction factor knowing how much it takes to pull it out and that. All of that's should be on construction drawings that would be then reviewed by the township for compliance. And then your building inspector would make sure it's built that way.
So they would be going out and verifying every particular hole that gets drilled and.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That would be the responsibility of your building inspector. He'll have a set of drawings. Or who would you designate, Mike or myself, but going out to confirm that they're actually doing it that way and not cutting corners.
But it appeared that they were just going to drive, metal down into the ground. They weren't gonna dig any holes.
Right.
Yeah, but he's saying it has to be engineered.
But it still has to be engineered, cause you do have, if you put a pole in the ground, you still have the friction factor on the pole that may, or may, and, which comes down then, you have to have a soil analysis, a soils report, to confirm that that'll fact work.
That you don't have the
So-
heaving on it.
You don't have, yeah, you gotta be at least 42 inches down, that's the frost law. But you're gonna be much greater than that in order to hold up a panel. Cause some of those panels are like 14 feet wide, I don't know, I have no idea who you're talking to, I don't know who this company is that you're dealing with now. But some of them are 14 feet by 20 feet, and then they usually put them in a raise that way, so they can actually maintain them. But now you're talking about a pretty good heavy pull on that. Those generally aren't just poles in the ground, I've always seen them with concrete and anchor bolts and that type of thing. If they're putting poles in the ground, there's gonna be a very serious soil report on that, saying, prove to me that that'll work.
Well, also too, is there any contamination to groundwater due to the steel being in the ground 10, 12 feet?
I wouldn't worry about too much about that, because it will deteriorate, you're right, in other words, it will probably.
Rust, I mean, or whatever.
But the question is, are they going galvanized, which is a zinc coating, or are they going stainless steel, what are they using? If it's just straight steel, I'd be more worried about it rusting out, and then all of a sudden falling off and falling apart.
Iron being in the groundwater, would that be an issue?
Well, you guys got an interesting groundwater here, cause you got your hydrogen sulfide eats about anything, if you just drive by, I think I lost part of my instrumentation. So, so with that said, that is some serious consideration into that, when they drill, they'll find water here, we all know that. And they'll find high hydrogen sulfide, and probably some of that, it looks brown to you, but it's actually iron bacteria. So they're gonna get a combination of that too, which deteriorates metal extremely fast, as we all know, for anybody living in London Township. So with that said, that has to be a serious consideration, and you're gonna have to put their engineer on the line for that one to prove with great certainty that that's not gonna be an issue.
Cause they're gonna use copper, there's copper fittings in a lot of those type of things. 'cause
I
they're
don't
wiring
think they know what they're getting into with London Township. I mean, nothing personal against London Township here, but your hydrogen sulfide's off the chart.
Yeah, it's about 40 parts per million, and it only takes 1 part per million for the human nose to
Right.
smell it.
Right,
then-
you're right.
and there's some similar, as you get into Milan Township, that there's still areas where you've got the sulfur content, and then you get into Exeter, and also Raiseville's got some sulfur.
Right.
So, as a township engineer, what do you think about somebody leasing land, multiple properties from different owners, running structures across property lines?
I wouldn't allow it over a property line right off the bat, a structure off the bat.
That, I mean, goes against every ordinance that we have,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah,
I
how do you
mean,
justify your side yard, rear yard requirements then when you do that?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, but that's what,
They're arguing.
that's their argument, is that that's how they run them, you know, and then they're gonna run the transmission lines underground through property to property to property. And I mean, they're not classified as a utility, so they can't go by the road. So,
Okay, that would take, in the best world, that would take an easement, a written legal easement by a registered surveyor, and that has the right to cross properties to do in order to do that. And that each one of those property owners have to sign off on that, to make sure that they know that I'm getting a wire from here going across mine and it's going there. It's almost like private roads, you know, which is why they got rid of private roads in Monroe County. It's because as soon as somebody says, I don't want that wire there anymore, well, how do you get to A to C when B doesn't want it? So everybody has to be on the same page if they're going to be doing that, number one. Number two, I'd highly recommend that they actually put the solar panels in and meet the minimum requirements for your side yard requirements. Because if somebody wants to bail on them all of a sudden, and you have to take a look at how they're gonna put the lease together. In other words, are they leasing it, to Mr. Smith the same year, same everything as Mr. Jones over here? Do they have a right to say, I don't wanna do this anymore? I realize that I prefer farming instead of having this out there, or I wanna build a house on it, can you move some of those out of the way? How is that lease written? That's gonna be critical. I think the township attorney should take a heavy look at the leases when they start even considering doing that, as part of the site plan process, not afterwards.
I mean, my whole argument was like, if I leased, let's say, an acre from my neighbor, and we'll do a lawyer lease, 20 years, 30 years, if this is allowed, why wouldn't I be able to build a barn half on my property, half on my leased property?
Because you still have defined property line.
Well, right, but so should they. That's what I'm getting at. If
That's
it's classified
exactly-
as a structure, what would, I mean, that's almost selective enforcement on our part compared to that ordinance.
And that's why I say you should have the panels, which are the structures, make the minimum requirements for your side yard requirements.
Right.
So if you have a 20-foot side yard, then the panel can't be any closer to that property line.
Right.
And then the same thing on this side, no closer to that. And then the easement that I'm talking about, the electrical easement would be something that does go through the properties, that's fine, but no structure.
Right. That's kind of my thought process too.
It was mentioned at different times that what we had asked Ag Industries to do to come back in yearly to review their permit. They said that was actually illegal to make them do that. Is that true?
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I
I
never heard
didn't
that.
either, so.
No, as part of the, and I think you should get a probably written rule from the township attorney on that, but it comes down to is that you put that as part of the agreement and they accepted it. I don't know why it'd be illegal.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. We would also have to add that verbiage in here in our ordinance to make sure that they abide by that requirement.
And again, I don't think you're gonna be able to pull their permit.
No, I don't wanna pull the permit, but I want them to come back in and say, all right, you got 14 trees down, or what are you gonna do about it? Yeah, you got a year to recover, but are you really gonna do it, or are you off in New York or somewhere else?
Well, you're putting quite a burden on your administrator more than likely, cause somebody's gonna call driving by and say, I see a dead pine tree, what are you doing about it?
Understand, but.
And then that's why I think Leroy, what you do is you have the money in the kitty. And then you say, hey, what are you doing about the tree? Let it back in writing from them, we're gonna be taking care of this day or this time.
So it would be good to write in a yearly review along with the,
If they're good neighbors, if that's what you're saying, in other words, are they complying or not complying? But again, what's your hammer, Leroy? In other words, you can call them all the bad names you want, but they still got
well, we're
their,
gonna add the other part. I mean, if you're not gonna straighten it out, we'll do it anyway.
I think that'd be critically
What I was
important, in
getting
my
at,
opinion,
so-
yes.
That's what I was confused about, because they said, well, you're not allowed to have them come back in every year and review their thing, which they've been really good about coming back in, and once we got everything discussed and straightened out, they appear to be trying to straighten it out, but they live there, so.
Right,
It's different.
well, the key thing to that, even when you're talking about the mining operations, that if that in fact they believe it's illegal, they should have brought that up at the planning commission
No,
at
it
the time.
it didn't come from them, it comes from, I won't tell you who, because it'll make you mad, so go ahead.
You know, that'd be a good time if they come back every year.
I think so.
That'd be a good time for the
To get
energy audit output,
Yeah,
so we
Cause that's the
can
most
keep track of
critical
that.
thing, is make sure it's still working. Cause how do you know if it's not working? How do you know if it's been decommissioned? They're not gonna come and tell you, are they? Maybe they will, I don't know. I don't know the company, so I don't.
Right, and well, and the
Chance,
thing is,
because of what the personal property taxes are on the thing, if it's not working or it's decommissioned, they're gonna yank that thing in a heartbeat, because they're gonna be paying a ton of money.
Well,
And
unless
if
they
it's
go
not
bankrupt,
operating,
but
they don't have the income to pay it, so
they
that's
won't
the
walk away from it.
caveat, you know, when you look at what the personal property taxes on that, those arrays, if something's not functioning, they're not gonna wait around to pull it, they're not gonna let it sit there as a monument, because the tax exposure is huge.
Is part of the lease agreement that they're paying the taxes on the property?
Yeah, that comes back to the property owner and how they work that out, but usually,
taxes on the
because,
property taxes,
because
but
the
it's
property,
personal
the property may, let's say it's still zoned agriculture, it's gonna be taxed at an industrial use, because that's how the assessor's going to view it, because it has an industrial use commercial use on the property, and that's how it's gonna be taxed or valued, cause
Well,
it's at
they'd
the
be
best
smart to
unit.
pay the people's property taxes regardless.
Well,
anyway.
that's my question, is
Because
that
if they
they have,
don't, it could go into, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, and they could take it out anyway, so. They would have to, I would imagine.
but if they stop, I guess my point is that, again, you don't wanna get into everybody's business on their leases and how they're doing it, but, at the same token, if I had that on my property, and all of a sudden ABC Solar bails on me, I've got one heck of a tax lien on my property that's about to occur, cause I can't pay that $20,000 or whatever it is. So, and your position here, as we all know, is for the better interest of the community. You have to be looking out for these people and getting these answers for them. Because more often than not, they're looking at it like, wait a minute, I can make X amount of dollars a year? Sure, let's do it. You're gonna have to bring the common sense to them, like, okay, let's say they bail, what are you gonna do? How is your lease written? How is that gonna be removed? Solar panels are considered hazardous waste, because they've got lead, silver, cadmium. If that decides to be a hazardous waste, all of a sudden now what? Who takes care of that? Have you ever tried to get rid of hazardous waste in the state of Michigan? Pretty exciting.
Yeah, what about the wires that are run underground too? Are they going to be required to pull those out?
That would be part of the reclamation
Yeah,
requirement,
reclamation.
and again, I think that that'd be something that's gonna be that irrevocable letter of of money that's gonna have to be put in consideration. You have to look out for the best interest of your community.
And then I think we talked about too, if it's agricultural currently and they rezone it, can it get rezoned back to agricultural after they pull out?
A simple way of doing that is contractual zoning. Has anybody discussed that with you?
No.
No,
Let's have a 5-minute dissertation on contractual zoning.
let's do that.
All right, what it is I come into your community and I wanna build something that doesn't really fit, like a PUD or something like that.
Solar farm.
What's that?
A solar farm.
Or a solar farm, let's say a solar farm. It's all right, yeah, we'll just go, hit it right there, it's a solar farm.
About what we're talking about.
Okay, and you're only allowing solar farms in commercial industrial, but you don't have any commercial or industrial, so you're asking to be zoned for this specific reason, for this specific location. That's considered contractual zoning. They're making a contract with you that if you zone this for me, I will build this and only this. Because if they come in and say, I wanna rezone it to be commercial, I wanna put that in there, you know, you might end up with an adult bookstore, you don't know. So the bottom line is,
Shop or, you know, we've got a whole list of things under commercial.
right, and it could be any one of those things. And I have seen that happen in Bedford. I'm gonna bring this cute little building in, okay, all of a sudden, wow, where'd that building come from? Hey, I got commercial zoning, I can do what I want. You wanna make sure that doesn't happen. And under contractual zoning, they are required to put a site plan together. You approve that site plan through the contractual zoning operation. And you handle it just like your rezoning, but it goes through called contractual zoning. And you go through the process of public hearing, and they wanna do this, contractual zoning is commercial, and if they stop doing that, and no matter what, it expires at a certain time. This doesn't go forever. But as soon as they walk off the project, or as soon as that's no longer valid or functioning, then they've got a certain time period that they have to have it completely removed from the site. 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, it'd be at your discretion. But here's the key thing. You cannot suggest contractual zoning. They have to present it to you. You only can make a decision based on what they're presenting to you. That's how the law is set up. And again, Carrie's your attorney now, right?
Yeah.
She'd be able to completely clearly understand that, because her and I have been through that actually with another township. They will present to you that they're requesting, let's say all you say is that you have to have, all these have to be in commercial or industrial sites. Well, the only commercial site you got is the liquor store and Old Strand Road, and you got no industrial, so, you know, so technically you don't have solar panels, if that's the direction you're going. But if you say you can do it anywhere, if you say, sure, we can put it on ag, they can do it anywhere then. They're still gonna have to give you a site plan, but they can do it anywhere. But if you do contractual zoning, you have control of what it's gonna look like, how they're gonna do it, how long it's gonna take. You have they will tell you what they want, and you can pretty much say yes or no on that situation. It's a win-win for both sides, because you have more say on it per se. It's almost like a PUD, planning and development kind of mentality, where you have input once they suggest, not even suggest, they request that they want this 40 acres to be zoned contractually as commercial only. Once that stops being a solar farm, it automatically reverts back to agricultural. There's nothing more you have to do except tell them, you're now decommissioned, get all that stuff off there, this is now back to agricultural.
Who makes that decision
Which one?
to allow them to do that?
You and eventually the township board. The township board does the final approval on most zoning.
So none of that goes to a vote at all?
To the people, you mean?
Yes.
No.
So it would all
No, but
stay
you do
with
have
the
public
township.
hearings, and you should take whoever's showing up at your public hearings, you should take advantage of that input and find out the flavor of the community, because again, you've gotta look out for the best interest of the community,
Right.
okay? So that does require a public hearing, cause it is considered a zoning change.
Can you take an Ag One farm, zone that commercial for, say, a solar array, when it is you, I guess, that you'd be the individual that would be creating a financial hardship to rezone that to commercial? Can that be done?
In other words, if I'm coming to you and saying I wanna rezone this commercial,
Yeah.
it's 100% financing on my part in order for me to ask you that. There should be no township financial investment in it at all.
No, I'm saying the property owner is committing a financial hardship on himself. That's why he wants that rezoned into commercial.
He is still gonna have to pay for that rezoning, and is he causing himself a commercial hardship? If
No,
you,
he's creating a financial hardship is why he wants that rezoned into commercial.
how is he causing a commercial hardship?
Why does he want that zoned into commercial? Because he wants, say, a solar array.
Right,
Now, is that solar array the only reason he wants that in the commercial? And if so, is he creating a financial hardship on himself is why he wants that rezoned? That's the question.
It wouldn't
Can he
create-
do that?
It wouldn't create a financial hardship.
It wouldn't
on
create-
That's
himself
why
unless
he's-
He spends more. He's looking at it as, the land is an asset. He's looking at how does he improve his return on his asset. And in order to do that, he might consider doing solar as what he's as the greater
Let's-
revenue generator, therefore then he's asking for that result. So, an economic hardship upon himself, that wouldn't matter, because he
See-
can file bankruptcy.
See, to me,
You know, that's-
right,
We're,
to me, I was concerned about changing things to commercial, because if you rezone a commercial, then the adult bookstore could show up automatically.
yeah, I just use that as an
But
extreme,
this
but
contractual zoning seems like it
That's a better argument.
solves an issue that I've been struggling with.
So
How are
what
we
if they
gonna
would
do
come to
this?
you as
So
the
then,
township?
when the contract is over, they decommission the site, it'd be their responsibility to clean it up, or we're gonna go back to that irrevocable letter of credit. And then it would, at that point, go back to ag. We wouldn't be stuck with some ground out here that would be like a brownfield that somebody would maybe wanna put a parking lot on to park extra Jeeps that they can't get sold or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
right,
So that makes good sense, but we can't suggest that. That has to come from them.
that's correct.
So what if they come and suggest, if they don't suggest that, now what?
And so they're asking to do a solar array that you're requiring on commercial property, and they wanna change it to commercial?
Correct.
It sounds like that'd be a classic example of spot zoning. You'd have to make a determination if that's what you really wanna do in your community.
That's what I
Yeah.
didn't wanna do.
But if they're coming in with like 3 different property owners and you got 2,000 acres, that's not necessarily spot zoning.
Well, it's still within that area. What's on,
That's right.
what's on the other 4 sides of it?
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, you know, if you're next to
Commercial, it's spot zoning.
it's a good argument, Doug, if you're telling me I'm next to a freeway, I'm next to a major road, I'm next to the railroad maybe, you might be able to pull that off,
And
but,
because of where it's at, it's in the neighboring township, and we don't know exactly what Milan Township's doing. So if the array is there, then you could say that it was commercial because it wouldn't be spot zoning.
but you can't use the township next door zoning to make your
No.
decisions.
Oh, no, absolutely
But
not.
yet,
Well,
we're,
you don't
we're
know
part
for
of this
future.
mess 'cause some of that
Yeah,
anyway.
You don't know for future if they're gonna put solar panels in London Township.
Can-
I mean,
No.
they
With
can plug and
mileage
play
and-
and go, you know, you gotta make the ordinance.
With this contractual zoning, can you do a referendum of the ordinance on that? So can somebody petition that particular project? So if there was like 100 acres that they did the contractable zoning, that goes in front of us and then to the board, can somebody petition that?
Petition
Can a
it-
resident petition it? You know how you can do a referendum of an ordinance?
They can
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 they?
petition on an ordinance, but they wouldn't be able to petition on a zoning.
No, they wouldn't, in other words, petition to, request you to deny it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, the residents.
I don't know that, I've never heard that happening. In other words, that's what the public hearing is, and there's gonna be two public hearings, they're gonna be with you and then also with the township board. And that's the time to express your opinion, to find out if everybody's on the same page. But I've never heard anybody saying, I wanna put that on the vote for agenda. We all know the elephant in the room here, why do they wanna do this? Cause they're gonna make money. So, but that's how come anybody wants anything rezoned. I don't wanna take a piece of property, zone agricultural, and make commercial out and go, gee, I hope I can do something with it now. There's always an end game.
Right.
And their end game is they wanna make money, so you have to understand that. So, in understanding that, you have to look at, again, what's the best interest of the community. If that's what you think is good for the community, because it brings in tax dollars perhaps, I don't know. You have to look at the overall picture.
Well, they're gonna build a project, whoever it is, they're gonna build it, and they're gonna leave. You know who's still gonna be here? The
Right.
people in this township.
That's why it's
And when
important.
you talk about the best interest of the people of this township, it's probably not 5, 6, 7 people, is not the best interest for the whole township. I would have to say the majority of the township would have to want this. You know, if that's gonna be the best interest of the township, then it's probably gonna have to be the majority of the township. That's who it's gonna have to be, not the 5 or 6 that's gonna benefit from this,
Yep.
even if it's that far.
So I guess the board requested us 3 things. They wanted
The board sent this back.
commercial property, they wanted setbacks equal to the extraction, which would be 300 feet, and they also wanted 20% of land mass
Of the commercial property.
of the commercial property.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah, 20% is gonna be very tough to do in a soil array, there's no question about it. I guess the bigger question would be,
Lose in court on that.
the bigger question would be, let's say if somebody does come in and do something commercial. Put solar to the side, let's say they wanna build a building, and all of a sudden they got a parking lot, they got cars. You've added traffic, you've added noise, you've added, but you've added value to that property. With a solar array, and I'm not saying I'm for them or against them, I'm just giving you all the options out there. There's no traffic. There's no noise.
Inverters,
What's that?
the inverters.
The inverters do hum,
Well, the process of building it, I guess.
in the process of building it.
It's a one-time.
But at
So
the
they
same
can replace
token,
panels.
what is the return to the township? And the only return you're gonna get is tax dollars, right? Majority of commercial tax dollars stay here, most residential go to Lansing for, well, I don't know what they do
I
in
mean,
Lansing, but.
Yeah, I don't know. But on the hindsight of that, I mean, but when they do build the solar array, it doesn't make any noise, but if everything, like, you're hearing all these horror stories everywhere about stuff not working out, and they're bailing, bankrupt, whatever,
Right.
and then we're dealt with that. And then the whole crossing property lines, keeping the setbacks, I mean, do they have a leg to stand on with any of that? I mean, if we make that in our ordinance.
Well, actually, you're being proactive with it. A lot of those communities that are having problems right now didn't have the discussion we're having right now. The what ifs. What if they bail? It happens all the time where these companies come in with visions of grandeur, and all of a sudden the federal money dries up, and they can't make it work anymore.
Right. I
So-
mean,
Because most of them, they're building them and they've got it under contract that it's going to consumer, it's going to DTE, because they've gotta put it in their bottom line portfolio.
Yes,
And that's what's driving part of that.
because they have to have a percentage of their portfolio being solar or wind.
what about, like, if it decreases home values being around it? I mean, there's millions of studies out there that it does. And they wanna argue it doesn't, but every realtor I know, even the realtors that are on the board, even says it decreases your home value. closer you live to it, it's decreasing your home value. Now, something coming in like that, that was basically zone agricultural land, to change that into some commercial to decrease your home value. Is there anything with that?
Done something like that's for the betterment of the.
No, I understand that, but I
communities.
mean, on a law side, a legal side, or an ordinance side, or any of that, I mean,
Is there any kind of guarantee to the value of your home?
Well, decrease, I don't know of any way that you can guarantee that.
I mean, like an average, I guess, or that.
You can force the solar people to do an independent study, not one of, my brother-in-law will do it for you, and all of a sudden, yes, greatest things in sliced bread, makes your value go twice as much. That's not what you're gonna need. You're gonna need an independent study, if that's the direction you wanna go, or if that's one of your concerns, or for that matter, if that's your neighbor's concerns. Now, if I got the solar array that goes over the curvature of the earth, and all of a sudden, value of my house is nothing compared to, I'm used to seeing cornfields there. That has to be evaluated and determined by the township if that's in the best interest of the community, to have that solar array there. Might not be the best interest of that one, maybe two houses next to it, but you gotta look at the big picture.
Right, tax revenue back to the township could end up being substantial.
Could be.
well.
I would highly
haven't-
suggest you
our
talk to your
township
assessor about that.
Voted in every millage that's went through, I don't believe, I mean, we have a surplus of money in our township as we sit right now. I don't believe we're in a financial burden at this
Well,
point.
not
to-
really a burden, but we would like to have some better roads.
I think our roads are getting way better.
Well, they are getting better, but, you know.
I mean, it just takes
Maybe
time to
some
put a
of them
road
should be
millage in.
paved.
I mean, there's other ways to do it
No,
than,
let's not start with that.
I got,
You know, I'm just
I got
saying,
a question for
there's
Joyce.
but there's other ways to do
people
it
that want water.
than, you know, you
You know,
got
I mean.
90% of the township, 80% of the township, I
Question.
mean, everybody in the meeting, I got notes, there was, whatever, 76 people, like, or whatever it was, there was like 6 people that was for it out of all of them, out of public
And
hearing.
it's probably the 6 people that own the property.
Right, and it's
Could
like, well,
I go back to
The
the
second
contractual zoning? Is that a document that we would need to create?
They create it in its entirety and present it to you. And they would present it first to your township attorney to make sure to verify its completeness before you even see it.
that's why my question was
As
about
far
this
as-
contractual zoning. We cannot suggest it, we cannot ask for it. Is there
Can-
legal parameters why we cannot ask for it or suggest it or
Yeah,
require
that's what I
it?
was wondering.
Why are we
There are
really
legal, there
on
are
a
legal
split on
parameters
this?
to it, because that's gonna be like you being proactive and driving the train. And that's your way of saying, I really want this, let me show you how to do it.
Oh,
Okay, so you've already decided you want it by telling that person I want contractual zoning. Don't have that right to tell somebody how to make this work.
are you aware of very many, not just for solar, but in other situations that they've done contractual zoning?
Mm-hmm.
Had that happened in Monroe County?
Oh, yeah, we've done 6 of them.
Okay,
Yeah, well, good example, I'll just use one, a propane company, Crystal Flash, wanted to build, put a, station so they can have just little jobber trucks come in and take this, and move on it. But it was an agricultural area, and that's considered a commercial application, but it was in the middle of nowhere. And so we had it contractually zoned. And then as soon as, Crystal Flash was done using it, did it for about 5 or 6 years, and they realized it was not economically feasible for them. They actually removed the tank, and that went back to agricultural zoning. That was in Dundee Township. And we've done it in Frenchtown and other places too.
Could we make a commercial zoning requirement part of our ordinance? That
You
is
mean
there in
contractual?
case anybody ever wants to? Yeah.
No, because again, that's one of those legalese things that, again, if you put it out there as a suggestion, that means that this is the way around our zoning ordinance. That's not your intent here.
So,
Right.
so how would we add it into our ordinance where we can't like hint to them to do it, but we also need to have it regulated that if they did do it, that it would at least meet the setbacks and whatnot?
well, it would have to be,
well, they'd have
Road
to
in
still
there is
comply with the
commercial.
ordinance that we have.
They have to, they have to do the ordinance.
Yeah.
Now, if you do the ordinance, and it says in here you have to be commercial zone, party's over for you. In other words, there it is. They come to you then saying, I'll do that commercial, but I'll do a contractual zoning.
Okay.
And then they have to submit the site plan, they have to submit the paperwork. Those are usually, those agreements alone between the township and the individual developer, they're usually 6 or 7 pages long. I mean, they're pretty comprehensive. I plan to do this, this is how I'm gonna do it, here's the drawing I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, this is who we are, and this is how we're gonna put it all together. So that gives you the opportunity to look at it and go, okay, I see what they're trying to do, and then you can make decisions, and you can still turn it down.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and I understand what you're saying with that, but if we put in here that it needs to be on commercial, and they obviously have the contractual zoning, but whenever it says it needs to be commercial, what if they just wanna try to come in front of us to just zone it commercial, like what
It's up to
we're.
the board.
Bring
to
it.
know.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead, go through the public hearing, and then if you want it, it passes. If you don't, it dies.
That's why we had the motion that asked Daryl to ask the board, to require them to read page 2-4, what is special commercial, what is, commercial for convenience, and look at all those different uses, because if the solar ever leaves, let's say they go in and they're only there for 15 years or 20 years or whatever the situation, it's been zoned commercial, and then that opens up, so then you go back to page, 20-27, and you read all the commercial uses, and you've got the drive-through, drive-in facilities, you've got
That's
motor
why the
vehicle
board would
commercial,
deny a
you
commercial
got
use.
Wausau, yeah, and so that's why requiring that to be rezoned, you're opening up yourself, you know, we're talking about what does it look like
That's
20
right.
years from
But
now?
you're not opening
Yeah,
yourself
we're
If
not-
solar
that's what he's
leaves,
saying.
you're
We're
just
gonna
opening
say
yourself
no to
up,
that.
you could look like a
They're
whole,
gonna have to come
completely
back
something
with it,
different that you
yeah.
could never even
Contractual
intended
rules,
That's
so
100%
by
right.
what you're
that's
doing.
their second.
And that's where we need to go back and read what's on there for 20-.
But, I mean, like you just
5-.
said, if it goes through us with a public hearing, the board denies it because they don't want that to happen, then the only opportunity they would have for a second round of opportunity would be to offer a contractual zoning.
And that's still gotta go
And then,
before the.
and then that would go through a public hearing.
You
and
still
then
gotta go
we
through the
would-
whole same process.
Well, right, but then we would possibly allow that or whatever, because we would know that's, nothing else would get built.
Well, and what's really critical on that, and obviously if that's the direction it goes, the site plan has to be complete. If you're a community, if you're a municipality that approves something of that nature, you're not only approving the zoning, but you're approving that site plan. But they do have to come back then and actually make changes to the site plan, but that site plan is attached to the agreement. I mean, they go hand in hand.
Basically,
There's
if
nothing
we,
more they can do.
if we allow it on Ag 1 and Ag 2, we lose all power for everything.
You really don't wanna do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
We're gonna lose
that's
all-
just my, knee-jerk reaction.
We're just gonna lose all power to everything, cause if they apply for it, we're gonna approve it, because there's no contractual with that, it's just Ag 1, Ag 2.
They can do anything they want with it.
That's one of the reasons the board sent it back.
Yeah.
The board sent this back and said commercial only. That's what they were looking at. I brought it back
But that's
to,
what the board wants, so let's, we'll move on from that.
and they also said 20% of commercial. Now, what did you say about the 20% of commercial?
Well,
Dave?
the whole function of a solar array is to get as much
Coverage.
coverage, right,
Photons.
as much as you can. And if you're gonna eliminate 40 acres into an 8-acre hole out of 40 acres,
It's not viable.
there's no financial incentive for them to even consider that. I mean, if that's the direction you're going.
Well, here's the thing. We got property owners that come to us and wanna build a 20-acre lake, but they only got 30 acres. I mean,
Don't allow that.
we
I mean, on
certainly
my
don't
present-
allow that.
On my Ag 1, or Ag 2 land, I got 1 acre, and I can only build on 27% of my property with all the setbacks. I
Yeah.
can't go any farther than that, so what's the difference?
Right, no, I get it.
You know what I mean?
That's why this discussion occurs. I mean, in other words,
That's
you just wanna keep things as fair as possible. How come all of a sudden the solar array can come in and do 90%, where I can't even put a pond on my property, or I put another
I mean,
barn
I can't
on
put a
it?
pole barn on my property because I can't meet the setbacks, because they're 50 feet from a cornfield.
The majority of stuff.
You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
it's, you know.
The majority of stuff that you engineer, what percentage of the structure is the property? Do you have like a rough percentage on that? I mean.
In other words, and if you're looking at a solar array, I would look at the footprint. I would consider the footprint. In other words, I would not accept an argument that if I got a solar array that's 4 foot, or 14 foot, say by 20 foot, which is kind of the standard size, 14 by 20, and it's being held up by a 6-inch pole, that I'm only, got a footprint of a 6-inch pole.
No,
No.
I
I,
see what you're saying.
No.
no
Yeah.
shadow.
I got you.
So I would take the actual square footage of the panel itself as, if you wanna think about it, a bird's eye view looking down, what's it doing?
That's a good point, I see.
Well, anything, I mean, any tower, anything, if they go on the widest
Yeah,
point for
yeah,
a
but we
footprint.
yeah, but we were talking about, what I was getting at, this whole could have been the footprint, could have been the
Oh,
walls,
yeah.
the 20%, and you could have,
Well, no, you'd have to do the
I did.
whole shed.
yeah, that's what he's getting at.
Yeah.
When you put the paperwork together for you too, because obviously I've given you a lot of food for thought here on how everything you're doing. When you're putting your letter together to make sure that you got the proper amount of finances that, in order to take care of or help the people that are gonna be having this problem, if in fact they bail. As we can tell lately, it's important to have a inflation additory to it. Because what it costs $20,000 today to take that out, it might be $60,000 10 years from now. So you're gonna have to keep up with that too and have that in the verbiage, that type of thing.
Would you recommend it being a certain amount of money off of the total project cost to come up with that number?
That number, what I would do is I would actually call a hazardous waste company right now. What would it take to completely remove these and take it to like Vista, which would be probably a number one lamb dump, which would be required to have it documented and that type of thing. Because right now, they are considered hazardous waste. They're not, it's almost like asphalt. If you're driving on it in the parking lot, it's fine. But as soon as you bury asphalt, Eagle considers it hazardous waste and you've just polluted the ground.
Because it's a petroleum product.
Because it's a petroleum product, right. So as soon as those panels go bad, or they start degrading, like we talked about earlier, now you have a hazardous waste situation. And it's getting more prevalent right now, particularly in California. I'm registered there too, so I'm running into that a little bit there. What do they do with the panels? Well, they don't have the proper way of removing the panels and putting them away. So everybody's in a quagmire there. They've got grants and financial discounts by the state, and it requires them to be working at an all-time basis. All of a sudden, I've lost this panel, and I've lost the money. Now I gotta buy it at full value, and I gotta get rid of the old one. It's a financial handcuff for a lot of people that have decided to go green. So, I would, at this time, if they present you with a 40-acre panel array, let's say, I would get them to get a price to you on what it would take to remove that today, right now, and take it away. What would that cost in its entirety? And then we'd evaluate that and probably add more to it, because I'm sure they're gonna lowball it.
And then you got inflation too.
And then you've gotta consider inflation from there on in. And that'll be a yearly incentive, add. Cause you don't know if it's gonna last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There's a micro station, I know you guys don't probably get around Monroe County too much, there's a micro station on the corner of Morocco and Douglas Road, to this day, that was put up in the 70s, that at that time the township didn't think about, well, that's the wave of the future, it's always gonna be there. That's still sitting there, because they can't afford to take it down. And it sits there still. And it's an eyesore. And it doesn't do anything.
Morocco and what?
Corner of Morocco and Douglas. The southeast corner of Morocco and Douglas. It's one of those old microwave things, that got the little angle on them.
It's in Bedford Township?
Ida,
Ida? Oh, it is in Ida.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's the one thing you don't want, is a white elephant in your 40 acres of, gee, what are we gonna do with that now? So, and you gotta make sure that the property owner knows this too. You know, I know that a lot of property owners are, because I've talked to the people in Milan Township about their situation, is that they're throwing some pretty good dollars at some of these people, like per acre, like $1,000 an acre, per year, that type of thing. It costs $400 an acre to grow soybeans for a profit, or I can make $1,500 an acre and sit in Florida and drink pina coladas. Not a hard call. I mean, because that's what they're talking about. And so,
You can spend
They-
$800 an acre
what's
on
that?
corn, I think you can spend $800 an acre on corn and still lose money.
well, that's true.
It's 16
Yeah,
bucks
but
a hundred.
we won't get into farmer welfare.
Expensive now.
You're looking for a job, I can probably get you
Call
one.
inflation, everything
If
goes
farming's
up.
getting that tough, Doug, you ought to sell all your stuff, I can put you to work tomorrow. Huh? What about it?
So anyways, the bottom line is that
More
you
you
gotta
spend,
make,
the more you're making.
you gotta make sure you're looking out for the township, and you gotta let, and you got, even a property owner saying, you gotta have to let them know, and they probably do know, you gotta look at the big picture. You can't just say, okay, look at all the money I'm gonna make for 5 or 10 years. You gotta look at the big picture. What are you gonna do when it's over with? Are you gonna go back to farming it, or when they tear it out? I mean, where are you going with it? Does it say farmland? Technically, yeah. If you actually remove it all, in 20 years from now, you got farmland back again. So it is farmland preservation if it goes away. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of looking at this.
I don't know
Is
if you
that
read
what-
through where we've got requiring requiring soil testing for what the nutrient content, the organic material, what the makeup is prior to any of the construction, and then at the reclamation, that must be back at that same fertility.
Are you concerned about them actually leaching?
Well, it's not necessarily, one aspect, let's say
Just to
if you
ensure.
are farming, if it is migrated off, or that it's been utilized by whatever the foliage that's underneath those things, that you want it returned back to that level of
It's gonna
fertility
be
before they
stagnant
leave.
ground for
So,
30 years.
Yeah, right.
So.
And the
it
bacteria
might
and
keep
everything's been
everything
died in there. You got no sunlight. And
Yeah,
all of a sudden, now what's it really worth?
yeah.
Wow.
Good point.
What, I mean, I know Doug's brought this up a couple of times about, Whitmer, you know, she has given, the green light on PA 116 land being, okay for solar arrays. What was PA 116 land designed for, Dave? But I wanna hear your take on this.
I know exactly what PA 116 is. PA 116 is kind of a bell curve for taxes. In other words, you get a tax deferment, and I only say it's a deferment because if you want to get out of PA 116, you got to pay all the taxes back. But they put you into in a category. I think they run 20 years. You can even go longer, but you have to re-up them. And then you get a less amount of taxes on that property if you promise to only farm it or keep it in farm operation.
So it was designed to preserve farmland?
100% to design a farmland.
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
well, also designed
So
to
because the
preserve
governor,
farmers.
the governor allows it, now they're taking it out of farm production, but they don't have to pay the back taxes because it's kinda on pause.
No,
That-
No, the caveat is,
Take it away from PA 116.
Well, it's still classified
It
as
just
PA
says that
116.
PA 116 is still in control of that piece of property.
because
So
if,
that
if-
says the way the
you're
taxes
not-
are figured is by your income total.
But you're not farming it
It's-
like
Wait,
it's
wait,
intended.
Well,
let me finish, okay? You are effectively not farming ground. You are getting money for it, but you're not gonna be, getting a cutback from PA 116 because you're making too much money.
yep,
Right.
PA 116 is only if you don't make enough money and you're paying too much taxes. And it's only a percentage of that tax. It could be 10%,
Percentage of it.
5%,
3.5%.
could be zero.
So
I mean, it's,
basically, this
116
township
is
has
considered-
received less taxes for that property than
No.
PA.
no,
No.
that's
Yeah,
incorrect. That's
no.
incorrect.
Can I
Is it-
talk?
No, I'm gonna finish before you
No,
get too
you
far
don't
down
even
the
know what
road.
I'm gonna say.
Because
If you
the-
don't make the profits, the township receives less PA 116, with it PA
No.
116.
No, no, no.
Township.
The township will receive all the property taxes.
How much does the township receive on PA 116 farmland?
They get 100%.
$25 an acre.
No, they get, everybody pays $25 an acre, whether it's in P 116 or not P 116. If it's,
Oh,
if
boy.
it's ag land, if it's ag land.
I got a
Now,
question for
Okay,
you.
he's got egg laying.
I got a
he's paying
question for you.
Way more than that.
If the solar farm, or if the solar array is on PA 116, and one of them is on commercial, are they gonna both pay the exact same amount in taxes, personal and property?
You know,
It'll
that's
be
a very
assessed-
good question,
it'll be
because
assessed
what
as
the
industrial.
governor has done is completely divergent
Spun it all.
of what the intent of
Yes.
PA
But,
116
but
is.
would they be paying the exact same?
I didn't
if
hear
one was
what he
on
said.
commercial and
She
one was on
circumvented
PA
it.
116?
She circumvented the rules and laws and the understanding of why you do PA 116 in the first place. That'd be almost like saying, you can have PA 116, but I wanna put a Ford factory on it because I want the jobs.
Yeah,
Completely has nothing to do with the intent of PA 116.
I agree with 100%.
Even if you owned 80 acres and you wanted to take a 2-acre corner out of it, you have to remove that 2 acres out of the PA 116.
Yes.
It's a pain in the butt.
It's
But
huge.
yeah, and so it's made it extremely difficult to do anything with that, and that was the intent of it, is to save farmland. Putting solar array is not saving farmland.
Thank you.
You know, so that was I don't, it's that go green, not go green Michigan State, go green mentality
Yes.
that, just makes no
But
sense.
the taxes though, would they be paying less
That's
if
an-
they were to get that done on PA 116?
That's an assessing question,
No.
that's not an
It's-
engineer question.
They're assessed as, even though, if, let's say we did allow it as ag zoned area, and we allowed it on PA 116 ground, the ground would be assessed and taxed at an industrial rate because it had the solar array on it. Those incomes would still come to the township. You would then also have the personal property tax, which then predominantly stays with the township, which is a huge volume of money. Back to the PA 116, that land would not receive any benefit from PA 116 because the income level would exceed the 3.5%. So that, and that because of it being paused, and that's essentially what they're saying. Now, the benefit, if you were to do on ag land, let's say you did allow solar on ag land, by still allowing it in PA 116, putting that pause, there still is that lien on that property. So when the solar comes out, you have a better chance of it returning back into agriculture because it's still in the PA 116. Now, I know nobody in the room here other than me has read the Public Act 116 of 1974, and I don't think there's anybody else in the room that even has one of those conservation easements that is recorded with the Register of Deeds, because I've got some as long as 47 years now. I've got some that have got another 40 years on those contracts. Now, with that said, then there's the Public Act 451 of 1995, when we amended P 116 and really cleaned up some of the language, because that thing was a bomb in a couple of paragraphs. And I actually had part of writing that thing. So it goes back to, that's when it was changed from the 7% to the 3.5%. And so if you're paying more than 3.5% of your income goes for property tax, that's when the circuit breaker comes in. So when you receive your tax bill based off the assessment, which is the same whether this land is in P116 and this one is not, and let's say they're both a 100-acre farm, they will have the same taxes, they will pay basically the same tax bill. Then what happens is then you file that with your income tax and you do your Schedule F, and you have to record all your taxes, tax bills go in with that. And you may wait 8, 9, at one point it was almost 15 months before that tax abatement came back, and so you may pay $30,000, but you may only get $2,000 or $3,000
So
back.
you're telling me, if I have 10 acres of vacant, non-homestead land, I would only pay $25 an acre in taxes? Because if
it's
that's the
farmland.
case, this place owes me a lot of money.
Or, but then also let's back up, did you buy the 10 acres and you came in and you paid $5,000 an acre, or you paid $10,000 an acre? You
What does
set
that
the
matter?
net- You know, it does.
No, because you put it
no,
in PA 160, it doesn't matter.
No, the taxes are based off of what the value of the property is.
Correct.
And so if you come in and-
Farmland is valued less than vacant, non-homestead land, so you're paying less taxes. That's the bottom
It
line.
comes back to,
It
if
doesn't
you
matter which
bought
way
it
you
for
wanna spin it.
$10,000 an acre, you will be assessed at $10,000.
But
an acre,
vacant
not free.
land, non-homestead, non-farm land is not, it has more of a value than farmland.
It
Do you
depends
not
on-
agree?
It depends on what you paid for it. We are taxed on a hypothetical capital gains every year for on our property.
It was given to me, how's that? I didn't pay nothing for it.
The
Now
assessor
what?
gives it a value.
Yeah,
Exactly. But you still paid more taxes.
On a 10 acre, you would pay it because they would look at it as more of a residential estate,
Yeah.
not a farmland.
So,
Even
what
though your
I'm
zoning
getting
might
at,
be
I don't
ag
have
one.
the opportunity to put that 10 acres into something to get a tax break.
You do not. You
Exactly.
can, you would not
That's
be
all
able
I'm
to
getting
get,
at.
you would not get into 451 or PA 160.
That's what I'm getting at.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if you actually farmed that 10 acres,
then you
you
could.
then could get into.
Put some
Yes.
pear trees on it, call yourself a farmer, you can maybe pull it off.
Yeah.
So now,
Vegetables.
another
We've
question
got
I
vegetable
have,
farms,
what
two
about
farms
our,
that are less than 10 acres there in P116.
what about our master plan that doesn't even coincide with any of this? That we have not even addressed whatsoever?
State law says every 5 years you have to evaluate your master plan and make the final conclusion on its validity. I don't know where this township stands on its master plan at this time.
We haven't touched it.
It's over 5 years.
Long
I'll tell you that.
With that said, I think you maybe have to put that on your agenda someday here.
2004.
It was on this
We
year.
did put it on the agenda back about a year and a half ago, and we kept getting muddled up with our ordinances that we could
So-
get the board to get done
I
and send them
do
back.
think that Leroy pointed out that when It was revisited in
5
like,
years ago.
yeah, I think it was revisited in.
We don't have it,
Yeah.
this is the most,
long as you have-
2015 or 16.
As long as you have a motion on it within the last 5 years saying that
What you do
we
is
looked
you
at it
look-
and it's fine, thank you very much, and you've complied.
I think that was done like maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
There you go.
But
And then we have been busy with this, so we have not done anything more with it. And we would have to make some adjustments, I suppose, in the master plan if we was gonna.
On the document.
Allow for this.
We did it at.
Your master plan is supposed to be the highway to where you wanna be,
Somewhere back.
not where you, not where, if you make a decision on something like this,
Whoever was taking.
you're,
minutes at
yeah,
that
you're
time didn't write it
conflicting
in
with the master
minutes.
plan, yes. Because,
So, yeah,
again,
look at
you're
it,
gonna have to have the
said
discussion about the
any
master plan.
changes in it. They
Hey,
said,
can we have one discussion here?
Yeah.
Well, we've been listening up for it this end, so.
Say that again, Leroy. I missed it.
There was.
we're talking about the master plan.
We were talking about the
And,
master.
and that's what Mr. Kubisky was giving us, some dialogue on.
Right.
You couldn't hear what we-
No, I couldn't hear him.
Right now, zoning is very fluid, as we can tell. I mean, we wouldn't even have this discussion 10 years ago on solar, so how would you know to even put that in your master plan for consideration? But you're having the discussion now, and it really should be eventually brought into your master plan, because no matter anybody coming into your community, the first thing you're gonna look at is your master plan. What do you wanna see this community in the next 5 or 10 years? That's what your master plan is supposed to do. Your zoning does today. Your master plan does 5 to 10 years. If you want solar arrays in here, if you want an oil refinery in here, if you want marijuana growing here, it'll be in your master plan. And if it's not in your master plan and you do want those things, you need to put it in there.
So,
If you don't, and somebody comes in, you say, doesn't meet our master plan. But you better have your house in order, because if I come in and I wanna do something really whacked out, and it's not in your master plan, and you'll say it's not our master plan, I'll say, yeah, but you haven't touched it in 8 years, so you're out of compliance. You don't want that situation to occur.
that was my kind of question, like, what if, okay, I'm coming into London Township and I wanna build a house, I come pull the master plan, I see this, and then all of a sudden this ordinance gets approved and they're building a solar farm right behind my house. Never said anything about that in the master plan. Is there a legal obligation with that? Because they're not in compliance, they don't have it up to date, it's not in the master plan. I built my house due to this master plan, not to see 150 acres of solar panels behind my house.
I have had situations where they've been denied because it does not fit the master plan. People coming in that's changing your zoning, not necessarily yours, but other township, and say, I know that's ag, but I really wanna make it commercial, or I wanna make it residential estate. And if your master plan is not addressing or discussing it, if it's silent on the fact, then it doesn't meet the master plan. That is in fact a way for this township to say, wait a minute, before we do anything more, either update our master plan, or we already updated it 4.5 years ago, we're happy with the way it is, and we don't see how that fits into our community. Those are all options / discussions, but I think we're getting more into the legal side of things than we are ordinances and that type of thing, because, again, you just start getting attorneys in the room and,
So,
I mean, I was just asking, should we fix this before we
What's
do this? But,
Ordinances are built on the legal system,
correct.
so, I mean,
But your master plan is also.
right. So when you put together an ordinance, you are in fact following legal guidelines that's gonna govern how that ordinance is put together and what that ordinance says.
And more particularly, what you can and can't do in your township based on your ordinance.
Right.
If you remember, what is it, 1 or 2 years ago, Anita did a lot of gathering of documentation about the master plan. Now, she never got it all the way here because of all the other stuff that happened. COVID-19 was probably the biggest problem, and us not getting our ordinances in place, which I'm not real sure they're correct yet, but I haven't seen them in on the website yet, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, she did put together a lot of stuff. We took the SEMCOG's, information at SEMCOG, and she kinda compiled that with all the, because, basically the verbiage in the front of that is basically the same thing that SEMCOG puts together, every 10 years or so, or whatever it was. Well, she was getting that, it's every year they put it together. So she was gathering that data. Now, I don't know where that stands, but to be on one side of it, we did try to, as a planning commission, tried to do some work on the master plan. It's just that too much other stuff got in the way.
Well, I know that the board did approve workshops for the master plan, not solar, and we haven't used not one of them for the master plan.
That's what the ideal is, to sit down and have a
So-
workshop and then talk about where you wanna go and what you wanna do. Who knows, maybe the master plan you got right now is the greatest thing you ever seen since sliced bread. You know, but you go through it paragraph by paragraph and see if that's in fact where you wanna be as London Township.
So you would definitely recommend doing that before we finish this?
I
No,
would
I
suggest we get this done because we know solar is in Milan, and if they're looking at coming.
Well, they can
wait.
I
disagree with
No,
that,
we have
Doug.
to get the order, we have to get an ordinance.
Why do we care what they're doing? This is our township.
I'm-
We
I'm
already
concerned
had
about
that
the legal.
discussion about basing
Yeah.
an ordinance on a neighboring township.
No, I'm
to
not talking
start
about
this
the
off.
neighboring portion, I'm just saying, we know there's a business in the area. If
So
we do
what?
not have an
There's a
ordinance
there.
and they come in and apply that they wanna do construction,
There's a ton of businesses in
because,
the area.
because we don't have an ordinance, does that leave us on a weaker leg?
I think you really should contact Carrie and get a legal opinion on that. I really believe that.
What have you found?
What's that?
I'm curious what you found as an engineer and a planner for other communities. When, let's say it's not solar, let's say it's somebody comes in and says, hey, we wanna make baseball bats, and we wanna cut them and make them here, and you don't have an ordinance for it, does that leave us sitting weak? Because we're in a
Actually, what
situation
I
we
found,
know they're
what I
coming.
found, in other words, let's say that somebody wants to come in, you have, and no ordinance on it at all. If your ordinance is silent on that, then they can't do it, because you're not allowing it, period. End of
Thank
story.
you.
We've gone into a township before where they wanted to put a decorative lake in front of this very large, very expensive commercial operation that we designed. And they did not have an ordinance that says that you can have a pond in the front yard. They always had them behind. And so they said, well, we have to deny you until we have an ordinance. And then we'll define that pond ordinance, and then once we have it defined, approved, put it through the newspaper, blah, 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 come on back and ask for approval. So that actually killed that until such time, because the ordinance was silent on that situation. So right now, if somebody comes in with solar, and you don't have anything in solar, then you're nowhere right now. In other words, you can't say yes or no, because you have no direction.
I was under the impression, because the state government was kind of pushing for this to be allowed, that if we didn't have something, that it could just kind of get shoved through with state discretion and we would have no control. So I was under the impression that we needed to, I was thinking more like Doug, we need to get this so that at least we have some control over what's
Every
happening.
township has control over zoning
I
ordinances.
wouldn't,
State don't control zoning ordinance per
No,
township.
but if
that would
it's-
greatly
Yeah.
concern me if the township starts bullying you because they want something.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, I would make a big stink out of that
I
if
don't
they're
think they have a
pushing you
mechanism for that.
into a situation you don't wanna be in.
When you look at these drawings from, any, let's say solar that come in front of you,
And we just had one last week we looked at.
yeah, do you also look at the master plan while you're making sure that before you say that, approve it?
We do.
Well, you don't necessarily approve it,
We
but
do,
basically
yeah,
say
we
that
don't
it
approve,
meets all your
we
plan.
make recommendations,
Yeah.
in other words, it meets the ordinance, it doesn't meet the ordinance, that kind of thing, it meets within the parameters. The one we are looking at here, just what I was just talking about last week, was incidental to an existing commercial building. So that in itself blended in because it was incidental to the building itself. A completely separate solar array is a different story altogether. And I would look at the master plan and comment on, I don't see anywhere in your master plan that you guys are okay with solar panels, but I'll just bring it to your attention. I'm not gonna say it's a good idea or bad idea, I'm just bringing it to you to have the discussion amongst yourselves.
Thank you, answer my question on that one.
I mean, I don't believe we should rush any of this due to anybody being in the opportunity of getting this,
It's
because
kind of pointless.
if we do it and it's wrong, we're the ones, the whole township's dealing with it.
If we do it
So,
and it's wrong, we don't have the best
That's
interest
their
of the
whole,
residents.
right, that's their whole objective, is to coming into these little townships where people don't know what they're doing, they pass an ordinance, they take full advantage of it, it happens all the time. And why do we wanna be the guinea pigs and do that? Get it right, and then if they decide to do it, then they decide to do it, but get it right,
On our terms,
on our terms, not
not
their
theirs.
terms.
Exactly, that's
Right.
what I'm saying.
But you've seen how when they first came in here, we almost passed an ordinance that would really, with this whole township, Ag 1, Ag 2, everything.
Like Milan.
I mean, it was like, just like Mylan's in that pickle right now.
We got a neighboring township that's not doing all that well, I don't believe,
And,
in the same category.
and if it takes us a year to do it, it takes us a year,
Sure,
another year,
it's fine.
whatever. I'm not worried about them sitting there doing anything. I just want this right, so.
Okay, well, I gave you more to talk about.
Look how easy that was, Dave.
What's that?
Look how easy that was.
That was so easy.
I know.
Anybody else got
I wish
any?
you'd have came in 2 years ago, you'd say, well,
Right.
you could save us a lot of
He
time.
needs to go to Milan.
I am a mine engineer. You don't want to hear those conversations.
No, you need to be the planner too,
You need
they're
to be
looking
the-
for
yeah,
one.
You need to be their planner.
You got time, don't you?
Oh, yeah, all the time in the world.
Snow's coming.
Any other questions? Anything else we wanna run past Dave while he's here?
No, I think he's given us a lot to, talk about and discuss, and, you know, I've made notes to take to the board and for my report anyway. So, I imagine the board will give us direction on which way to go after
I do
I
got
brief
one
them
more
on this
question.
meeting.
Do you think, due to solar panels, the drainage of the water will change on the field?
Actually, that,
Like puddle and drain in a different
The
direction
You will
compared?
have a little bit of a change because you're.
I'm
putting
asking-
an
I'm asking
vertical
him, not you,
surface.
Doug.
you're gonna have reels, in other words, where the panel comes down, because they're gonna be at an angle, they're usually about 15 to 20 degrees. They're gonna come down, you're gonna have that area that's gonna concentrate the water, yeah.
Would it wash
But-
it out and create,
But you won't have, you'll still have ground that it'll go into. You know, so you're really not adding impervious footprint per se, but you are concentrating it.
would it change the direction? So like, let's say these floodplains, like for instance, by my house is a floodplain, and that water comes within, now I don't have to pay flood insurance because I'm like within the setbacks of the water where the floodplain is.
Mm-hmm.
But that water comes pretty damn close to my house, I mean, within, I'd say 100 feet maybe of my property line. Would that change that? When it flood, like, you know, because more water's concentrating at one time in one area to run off, would that change that and possibly grow that, might take it away?
It might, and I only say it might because if you're in a clay application and you're putting it to one area, then you're now going down rows and it's eventually trying to collect somewhere. Got a lot of sand here though,
Yeah.
so the question is, would that really
It's
happen?
all saying pretty much, right?
It'll actually dissipate into the sand more than likely. But, actually, it's a good question, because we still, even on any solar rays that come into my other townships that we would look at, we require the drain commission to review it, to make any, see if there's any changes or modifications to that in order necessary to make sure that there's not a drain problem.
Well,
And we actually asked the road commission to look at them too, even though there's not any roads that we want.
if they're driving stakes in the ground, I mean, if they're hitting tile, there's old clay tile in a lot of these fields.
There is.
Are they hitting tile? Is that, you know what I mean? I don't think we have anything in there of that. We do have a maintain the drainage, I get that.
Drainage that
But
needs
we don't have anything stating that there has to be some type of study in the beginning.
It should be on the site plan.
During-
The site plan has to show drainage and how it's gonna be addressed.
By an engineer.
Oh, yeah,
by
the
a-
civil, that's the key thing here.
I mean,
Any site plan that puts together to this township has to be signed, for some reason you guys haven't done that too much, but it has to be signed and stamped by a professional engineer. Just because I can do a site plan on a piece of toilet paper and a crayon, shouldn't be reviewed,
right.
you know? but your ordinance isn't clear about a professional engineer doing site plans. So the simple answer is you should have a professional engineer looking at putting the site plan together. So I don't have to sit there and design it, cause it doesn't make sense.
So like that would be a study through Eagle?
No.
Whatever that's called,
That would be through the drain commission. The engineer of record, whoever designs it, would submit to us and the drain commission for review and consideration. The drain commission then would actually be in contact with us saying, hey, we may have a problem, they're concentrating the water a little bit more, which may cause a floodplain problem. Now, one of the issues that came about a year ago, 2 years ago, I can't remember who sent it to me saying, I think it was you, Dara, we're considering putting, solar in this area right here. And I wrote back a 2-page letter saying, great, you're in the floodplain, these are all the things you gotta follow to do the floodplain. Are you sure you wanna do that? And then that disappeared.
Well, there's a lot of floodplain.
There is,
Throughout the
particularly on the
whole
west
river.
side.
Yeah.
I know.
And that's where all the solar kind of is migrating.
But there's
Yeah, but
there's a
that
lot of
original one, that was
restrictions
put
in
together by-
building within a floodplain area, major restrictions.
That one was put together by a former employee that was just, whatever his needs were.
Oh, I
really
got one,
wasn't put together.
I do have another question. So, if we do put it in commercial, let's say, should we still put an overlay district in the area that could change to commercial? Or would we open it up to the whole township? I mean, what would be a recommendation?
I've never been really a fan of overlays, cause what an overlay is, I wanna build this, but I wanna use the requirements that are on the ground at that location. So you're mixing, matching your ordinance. I wanna put a commercial building in an ag area, cause it's an overlay. So but I gotta comply to the ag rules, or do I apply to the commercial rules? Then everything gets a little foggy, I mean, you start doing overlays.
But I mean, what if the township like said, you know, if we did, contractual zoning and commercial, if that's the way it goes, and we did decide on that, but we kept it, let's say, so class on the west side of the township, we would be okay with that to an extent, or not okay with it, or we want it on the east side, whatever, you know what I mean? Because there's less houses over there, there's less this, how could we control that? I mean, if they came with it, obviously you could just deny it.
Every zone, whether, any and all zoning, when that shows up in your table, has to have a legal description. And they're gonna only ask for this piece of property right here. You can't say the whole west side of Tuttle Hill Road.
Right.
You can't do that. It has to be on an individual basis. And so that's how you control it, that this is allowed. And then the next conversation logically is, well, if you okay him, how come I'm right next door, you can't okay me? Everything stands on its own merit. You know, there might be a reason why you don't want this one. This one's okay, but this one's not okay. Too close to the floodplain, too close to houses, too close to woodlands, farmlands, wetlands, you know, uplands. There's always something that you have to look at the big picture and see if that's what you wanna do or not. And that information, again, isn't your responsibility to chase down. It's whoever's coming to you requesting this, it's their job to chase it down. And if you're not comfortable with the answers, you give it back to them and say, something's wrong here, I want you to look at this. Or even if you're that close to a wetland, or not a wetland, but a floodplain, there's a chance that you might be getting into wetlands. And then that would be really bad for anybody messing around wetlands in the state of Michigan right now. They're really whacked out on wetlands right now.
Well, and two, I would think like, let's say you put up 500 acres of solar panels, would that not affect the wildlife around there? I mean, the habitat for deer and everything else that, like, let's say somebody's got a little 5-acre parcel that they hunted, it's been great for, or 10 acres. All of a sudden, all these solar panels come around, there's no deer there no more because they have nothing to eat.
Can't get around them, right?
You
No, I
can't get
that.
around them, now you're surrounded.
That would be a DNR question particularly.
Right.
That's
I
the
mean,
good, the
I'm
good
just
news,
saying, throwing
but the
it
bad
off.
news is, DNR's up in Lansing. Lansing's the one saying you gotta do this to save the penguins, or whatever they're doing today. You know, so. Yeah, there you go, that's what, that's why. No, my point being is that the green machine.
I mean, in logic
is-
sense though, I mean, I would believe that it would eliminate a lot of that wildlife that
Yeah, it very well
everybody
could.
enjoys hunting and, you know, dealing with.
And it's depending on the height of the panels,
Watching.
who knows, maybe they go underneath it and they eat, you don't
No,
know.
it's fenced in, they can't get in.
The fence we required was what, only 6 feet?
7.
7 feet. It takes a 10-foot fence to keep deer out.
Well, once the deer get trapped in there, they've had videos where they can't get out and blah, 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 that's a mess.
Well, what, have you thought into how you gonna keep the grass and everything down in there?
They said they grow natural for bees.
Natural?
Like
Pollinators.
Pollinators for the bees, so now we're gonna have a bee problem, but yeah.
Well, bees are a good thing. for
Bees
food.
are good.
Well, I agree bees are a good thing, but what are they gonna put for, I'm just asking now, I don't, what are they putting in there for bees?
No, it'd be like,
Clover?
no, your pollinators, which you could do clover, you could do a ton of different kinds of flowers that can be under wildflowers and that in those mixes.
But that doesn't have to get
USDA's
mowed,
got
there's no, we have
commercial
nothing in
list.
here about maintaining the setbacks. I mean, that, the hell, that can go up 4 feet, I guess, I mean, I don't know. You know, I mean, I got pictures of one in Indiana, weeds about 6 foot, they're taller than the shrubs and bushes and trees that go around the fence, the weeds are, you know, and half of them are dead, I mean, this is just what I picture, you know, happening here, and I mean, that's already
Yeah,
happening
and you
in
don't
other
got a noxious
townships.
weed, ordinance, and I don't advise you to get one either, but,
We do.
do you have a weed
Well,
ordinance?
that, or the state does.
No, we do.
Yeah, we do.
It,
Yeah,
it's
we do
a,
have one.
it's a
It hasn't been updated.
But
in
how do we
20 years.
enforce that? Oh, we're pulling your permit, that's not gonna
miscellaneous
happen.
ordinance, it's not in the zoning ordinance.
So you do have a noxious weed ordinance?
Yeah,
So then you can actually go ahead and mow it and then charge them.
yeah. It's one of the
But we have to
standalones.
create, we have to
Oh,
write
it's a
that in
standalone?
there.
They, and
That's
people have
why-
been cited for it already.
But they're saying they're gonna put the pollinators and everything within the setbacks too, so they're not planning on mowing it, they're planning on creating a natural habitat for bees.
I've heard of solar arrays actually just letting goats go.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd see sheep, something.
but I mean, within the setbacks from the fence to the, whatever the setback is,
You'd make a good
I
shot.
mean, to let that all just go, I mean, I would think that would be amazing, especially next to a road.
Who enforces it?
The binder is not out there, it's probably actually in the office area, which I cannot legally go in.
Do you want me to get that for you?
But
No,
there
that's
was.
okay, but if you have a noxious weed ordinance, then that covers that, but
Oh,
again, it goes back to how, okay, you call them, you say you got weeds, what are you gonna do about it? I don't know what your ordinance says about.
USDA, or excuse me, MDA has, and MDARD now does have a noxious weed,
But they're not calling
regulation.
them obnoxious, cause they're,
Well, it comes under that.
They comes out, yeah, wild.
It's if it's a certain type of weed
that's
that
it,
you don't want.
that's a loophole, so
So that would go against that irrevocable line of credit.
Yeah. I've got some language written up. I was looking for
It's good, I've been trying to, I've been taking notes too, but I don't have language,
it. I got some language, but I don't think we need to get to that point apparently.
so. Alright,
You got more to do.
anything else? We got plenty to,
You know
plenty
what,
to
it's
discuss,
not in here,
and it's
it
already
expired.
going at 10 o'clock.
On the
That's what
website.
happened.
What happened?
I think it expired,
Oh,
or
did-
maybe they removed it because it's not in the miscellaneous ordinances.
I never saw it.
Or was that one of the things McKenna deleted from her book?
I remember seeing it, but I
Yeah.
also remember when, I was compiling the miscellaneous ordinances, that one of them had, expired, it had an expiration date. And it was years past expiration.
Never heard of ordinance expiring.
I just wanted to let you know there is no noxious weeds in the miscellaneous ordinance.
That's what I'm looking for.
So I've been talking with Bonnie about getting one. I can have touch about it.
Okay.
so we have, just between all of us, we have,
Somebody on that once.
the township says we
I
can
remember
offer
seeing something.
$25,000.
There's a small blip about weeds, I pulled it.
I have one last question. What would you come up with for a bond number? 'Cause I remember we were just kinda,
We have 25,000, I don't think that's anywhere.
That was with the
Oh.
escrow.
That's
If
escrow.
if I was the
That's
developer,
escrow.
I'd give you small bills right now.
Right.
I mean, here you go, party's over. No, you're nowhere near, that's not even in the ballpark.
No.
what would you
I would
recommend?
actually literally make them find out what they're putting in, and then it would be comparable to what they're putting in, what it would take to be completely removed, and get a quote from an independent company that does that removal.
The cost, whatever the cost to put it in would probably be about the same cost to take it out, so you're talking 7 figures, maybe even 8 figures.
I don't know about 7 or 8 figures, but it'll be,
It should be like a percentage of it possibly,
But it'd be-
like, that would be a good way to
Well,
say.
There's life cycle calculations we can do.
yeah, the biggest problem is you guys don't wanna be, end up footing the
What
bill.
else do we
Yeah.
get?
In other words, if something goes wrong, and that's what unfortunately
No,
a lot of townships do, is they, throw 25,000, okay.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Well, then they're gonna walk away and say, go ahead and use your 25, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, nice, you know, thanks
Well, I
for-
mean, this is
thanks
all
for
the
playing.
letter-
That's
applications
where
and
the
the-
letter of credit is the way to go, and I'd suggest.
The letter of credit has to be the way to go on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, yeah.
And
I
your
know
letter
the
of credit
20,000 's
will be determined by what it takes to remove it.
Okay.
Okay, so they might have an irrevocable letter of credit of 100 grand, 120 grand. How bad do they wanna put the array in? Because they gotta have to have it removed somehow.
Plus,
Yeah, but if it's a
Plus-
letter of credit and then they go bankrupt,
The letter of
The
credit
bank-
is actually
the bank
a
holds
bank
Kind of an escrow
is
account.
promising that they'll pay you no matter
Yes,
what happens,
the bank-
not the
bank
individual.
is the person holding the bag on this situation.
So,
They
the
maintained
bond,
it as their obligation.
two
Not a
separate-
bond.
That's not a bond, but would you also apply a bond with that? So just that, okay. I
Right.
got you.
But the letter of credit has to include the decommissioning,
That's
how
that's the
do we-
main reason you
but
got
how
it.
do we also bill them for, like, let's say, fixing
Maintenance.
something, maintenance, cutting grass, planting trees, how do we?
That's all part of that's all part of the agreement you come together with and as.
So that's
as
the
a mention-
total amount we would have to come up with?
Right.
What would you do for the permitting process? Because if you come forward, it's costing township money, right, a little bit. So would you do like a bond until that gets approved?
That was
and
what
then
the
with that letter?
25,000
Yeah, but I was asking what he would do
Yeah.
on that.
Let's be clear what bonds and how bonds work. If I'm a contractor and I have bonds, there's bid bonds, performance bonds, payment bonds, labor bonds. Number one is the insurance company will fight you. No matter what, they don't care what the real problem is. You're going to have to hire an attorney to go after that bond payment, that paperwork. What you wanna do is eliminate any kind of bonds. You wanna make sure you got money in the bank with your name on it. When I say yours, I mean London Township has a right to get it and can be retrieved in order for you to use to take care of these problems. A bond also disappears if the contractor goes under. All of a sudden, there's nobody paying the bond then not necessarily defaults, it expires, it sunsets. So now, again, you're sitting there with a bond, a piece of paper saying, hey, I got a bond for 100,000, you better go fix that, bond's worthless.
No, I got all that 100%, but what a little bit my question would be, is it the applicant that comes forward, and it's costing township money when we're sending that, the drawings to you and all that, and then all of a sudden they back out. Now, all of a sudden, we're out that money, I just was wondering
How that works?
Yeah,
How it works in most townships, and Mike and I are still trying to work that out in some of the things we've done, he will call and say, I want you to look at something, okay? And I give him a price, and something like that, it'll cost $500, I'll take a look at it, or 1,000. Or even I talk to Penny once in a while, what'll it take to do this? You got my price, or approximate,
yeah,
okay? You get a deposit from that contractor, that developer, that owner. If I'm thinking that our price, and this is all townships do this,
yeah.
my price is $1,000. You will get a deposit of $2,000. You will be in control of the $2,000. I bill you $780. You take that out of there and you give that person the money back. That's not, so it's a deposit. And that's required before anything happens. And that also takes care of your money as a township having a meeting or putting it as a public hearing or putting it in the newspaper. It's all covered that way.
Yeah, okay.
That's why
You
those
should
first
never,
meetings-
ever have the township pay a dime for anybody showing up in front of you. Of course, except me.
No, I mean, that answered my question pretty well,
Yeah, that
I
makes
guess,
sense.
it does, yeah.
all right. Well, I was thinking that maybe if there's no other questions, we can wrap this up and think about it.
Yeah,
A lot of stuff.
Everybody's got homework now.
yeah, and change.
Any other questions for Mr.
Escrow to
Kavitsky?
line of credit.
Hearing none, I'd like to thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you.
I-
Thanks for
I
asking.
thank you very much. So if there's no discussion on this particular subject at this time? Shall we move on, or you wanna?
Been doing this for good
Good.
I
All right,
What you lost?
No.
well then, let's, go on to next thing on the agenda is second citizens time. Thank you, Leroy, for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
I would also like to thank our wonderful engineer for coming in, and yes, I agree, had he been brought in earlier, probably could have gotten this done a lot smoother. I also would like to thank PC members that spoke up about not pushing this, not rushing this. You know, we gotta learn from our neighbors over there in Mylan that you rush it and then you're gonna put yourself in a predicament. And it's not worth it. And our residents are worth it to protect everybody. So thank you very much.
All right, anybody else? We've had some young people here tonight, you've been kinda quiet, you wanna say anything?
Thank you for having us here.
You here for a government class?
Yep.
You're welcome.
And who's your teacher?
Morlock.
Morlock, okay, that way it's on the public record, they know you're here. Oh, can you give us your name, that way they'll hear it and they'll verify.
Savannah Endicott, Jordan Shade, and Madison Gray.
All right.
I heard you guys to go to the Mylan.
Actually, mine is right in between Saline and Mylan, so I have two.
Oh, okay.
I'll stick here. This is my township right here. I don't know where else.
All right, anything else? Seeing no more citizens' comments, any commissioner comments? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion by Doug, seconded by Jimmy Turner. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go home.
What time is it?
9:45.